Harris has represented California in the Senate since 2017. Before that, she served as California's Attorney General and the District Attorney of San Francisco. Senator, wages for the bottom 50% of workers have largely stagnated over the past 3 decades, while income inequality has increased to its widest level since the Gilded Age a century ago. The top 1% earn more than 20% of the nation's income. The top 10% earns 90%. Earns 50%, leaving 50% for the other 90%. What would you do about this?
Well, first let me just say how great it is to be in the House of Labor. And I thank all of you for the work you do every day, because SEIU, and CAP I want to thank as well, but SEIU and the men and women of SEIU, you do the work every day that is some of the most noble and important work that any person could do. You give people dignity, you give people strength, and as leaders in SEIU and leaders in organized labor in our country, you are the voices that fight for working men and women. And given that, and I'll connect this to the point that you're making, Stephen, given the attacks that we have seen on organized labor, and in particular over the last 40 years, we can see clearly, and in fact there are studies that have made this clear, that there is a direct correlation between the concerted attacks on organized labor and the increase of wealth inequality in this country. There's a correlation. Because as we know, labor has lifted up working people, built the middle class, brought us the 5-day work week, brought us the 8-hour work day, brought us what we need around sick leave and maternity leave, and has brought dignity to working people across our country. And when organized labor is attacked, working people suffer and income inequality grows. And so, what do we do to address that? And what do we do to hopefully correct course? Part of it is we need a president of the United States, which is the kind of president I intend to be, who will fight for working people, and specifically will fight in a way that will be about supporting right to strike, supporting right to organize, clamping down on corporations that in any way try to impair or disable the ability of unions to organize. It will be about fighting for 15. It will be about recognizing that we need a Department of Labor that is run in a way that respects the dignity of labor. And these are the things that can and must be done to correct course in our country.
Thank you. So, in the past year or two, we've seen a surprising surge of labor activism. There are the teacher strikes in West Virginia, Oklahoma, Arizona, Kentucky, Los Angeles, Oakland. And we've seen the Fight for 15 around the country, and the big Marriott, the hotel workers went on strike against Marriott, and a recent big strike in New England against Stop and Shop. With all this activism, is this causing Democratic leaders, senators to talk about what this might mean? Does this create perhaps more opportunities for labor or for labor legislation?
Well, first of all, I think that all of these fights point out that we have an economy in this country that is not working for working people. I am proud to, in my career, have stood on the picket line with organized labor. I am proud to have stood, in particular, with the teachers in Oakland to West Virginia around what they needed to do to advocate for wages and benefits. And what I think it highlights is that there is still so much work to be done, and the barriers to organized labor being able to organize and strike are something that have grown over a period of time, and we need to address that. We need to address that both through legislation, but also through the bully pulpit that comes from the President of the United States to speak up about the need and the right that workers have to be able to organize and to fight for their rights. So generally speaking, that's how I think about it. And it has to, so let's be more specific. It has to be about, for example, banning right to work laws. That needs to happen. It needs to be about fighting to increase penalties on corporations that stand in the way of organized labor being able to do the work that is about, again, advocating for working people. There are very specific things to be done. It is, for any president in the United States, the responsibility of understanding the power of the executive as it relates to various federal agencies that have an impact on these issues. And that is not only the Department of Labor, it's the Department of Commerce, it's HHS, and having a president who uses her executive authority in a way that is about fighting for working people and making sure that barriers are not in place that prevent working people from doing the advocacy they need to do to fight for meaningful wages and benefits and workplace safety.
Nowadays, many workers are concerned about whether they can ever afford to retire. 1 in 2 workers does not have a retirement account. In my book, I read about a worker from South Carolina. She worked more than 20 years for a fast food company, Hardee's, and she retired without a 401k, without a pension, without any savings. So the average American who has a retirement account only has $60,000 in their account. Even worse for workers of color, they average only about $32,000 in their accounts. So what would you do if elected president to increase retirement security to ensure that every American can have a decent retirement?
Right. Well, again, you can look at my background in terms of what I've done, even when I was Attorney General of California for 2 terms, in standing with labor around what we need to do in our battles around pensions. It is also about making sure that people have, during their working life, the ability to close what is otherwise a gap in terms of their ability to have their wages meet the cost of living. Because that's a real issue. In America today, almost half of American families cannot afford a $400 unexpected expense. In America today, in 99% of the counties in the United States, if you are a minimum wage worker, working full-time, you cannot afford market rate for a 1-bedroom apartment. In America last year, 12 million people took out on average a $400 loan from the payday lender at an interest rate of often in excess of 300%. Which is why I am proposing, and as president would implement, a change to the tax code, such that if your family is making less than $100,000 a year, you'll receive up to a $6,000 tax credit that you can receive at up to $500 a month. Economists have described this proposal as what would be the most significant middle-class tax cut we have had in generations. It will lift up 1 in 2 American families, 2 in 3 American children. It will lift 60% of African-American households out of poverty. And you know, it's interesting. I gotta stand up, I'm sorry. And it's, I'm sorry, you know, I'm used to being, okay, trial lawyer. And it would lift 60% of those families out of poverty. And you know, it's interesting because then I go around the country talking about it. Again, economists have said this will be the most significant tax cut for middle class families. And then you know how folks are, right? Well, how are you gonna pay for it, they'll ask. Well, that's really simple. On day 1, we're gonna repeal that tax bill that they benefited the top 1% of the biggest corporations in our country. That's how we're gonna pay for it. So that's gonna be part of helping families get through the month, right? Because that $400 unexpected expense, that's a car repair bill you didn't see coming that you can't afford. You know how expensive it is to replace tires on a car? It's about looking at what we need to do around the unexpected hospital bill. Let's talk about what we need to do to reform the healthcare system in this country, which is why I'm supporting Medicare for all and what we need to do around allowing healthcare to be accessible. It's about the cost of living around rent. So what I'm proposing is what I call the Rent Relief Act. If you are paying more than 30% of your income in rent plus utilities, you will get a tax credit such that we can help you get through the end of the month and pay that rent and still meet all the costs of living expenses. So these are some of the proposals that I'm offering as a way to help people by the time that they retire have enough money in their accounts to be able to retire with dignity, having lived a life of working hard and a noble life of good work and work that is dignified and important to keep a society functioning.
when President Trump and the Republican Congress passed the tax cuts in 2017, $1 trillion in tax cuts went to corporate America. At the time, the Trump administration said the average worker would get at least $4,000 in pay increases as a result of this tax cut. That hasn't happened. What has happened instead is that corporations bought back stock to push up their stock prices to reward investors. So the shareholders did well, the workers did not do that well. Would you do anything to limit stock buybacks to help ensure that maybe more of the corporation's prosperity would go to workers?
I mean, let's be clear. First of all, we need to repeal that tax bill. And corporations have got to pay more taxes. And this whole trickle-down theory of economics is ridiculous. I was going to use another word. It does not work that way. What ends up happening, Stephen, to your point, is that they pocket more money, and the theory would trickle down as if they have more money, then they will be benevolent. Well, that's not happening. What they're doing is they're keeping it in their back pocket instead of sharing it with the rest of the country and society. And we've got to be honest about that. And we've got to recognize, did you all see the reports about the number of corporations that are paying 0 federal taxes? That's outrageous, 60, outrageous. So what we need to do, and the kind of president I'll be, is about passing a policy that is about lifting up the middle class. It will be about recognizing that corporations need to pay their fair share and that the economy should not be on the backs of working people who deserve to be able to live a life of dignity. Let's also be really clear about this. Over the last many decades, the rules have been written in a way that has excluded middle-class families, has excluded working families. You look at it on a number of issues. What have we done about what we need to do around affordable child care? One of the biggest barriers to families being able to achieve economic health, much less success. You look at child care and the cost of child care, in many places, it's more expensive to have your child in child care than it is to pay tuition for a year for a college student. That ain't right. Let's look at what we have not done around minimum wage. This fight for minimum wage is real. Federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. That is $15,000 a year. Can't nobody live off of $15,000 a year in this country. And so these are the things that have to be spoken about in a way that is honest. We have to be honest. This system is not working for working people, and we've got to reorder and correct course.
Thank you, Senator. So we will now take questions from the audience. Jennifer Berry? I don't see you, Jennifer. Oh, okay. Jennifer is a McDonald's worker from Milwaukee and a Fight for 15 member.
Hi, Kamala Harris. My name is Jennifer Berry. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I work at McDonald's and I make $9.90 an hour as a crew trainer. I'm with the Fight for 15 in a union because I want to see major corporations like McDonald's be held accountable for low pay, sexual harassment, and better working conditions. So my question to you is, how will you get the CEO of McDonald's, the world's second largest corporation, to sit down with fast food workers and create union jobs?
First of all, I want to thank you for your leadership and for your work. And I want to say this to everybody here. The work you do is the work of being a leader in difficult times. The work you do is the work of having your members look you in your eye to find some sense of comfort and some sense of guarantee that everything's going to be okay. The work you do is the work of every day speaking with your members about the challenges they face in the workplace and in their personal lives. And you still keep fighting against great odds. And I cannot thank you enough, our country cannot thank you enough for the work you do of fighting for working people in this country. So, look, in my experience, folks know how to take the call. And so part of it is calling him up or her up and saying, look, we need to sit down and talk. And we need to talk about the fact that you can't tout with a sense of pride about being one of America's oldest businesses, that is a business that represents symbolically who we are as Americans, and then not reflect in their business practices American values around people who work hard being able to have dignity and be able to pay their bills. In our America, nobody should have to work more than one job. So let's talk about our values. That should be the case in our America. And so you can't go around talking about the Golden Arches as a symbol of the best of America when you are not conducting yourself in the best way in terms of supporting the working people of America. Because people deserve to have a wage that allows them to keep up with the cost of living. You know, we can talk about a minimum wage, and of course we need to fight for 15, but really that's minimum. That's a minimum standard of living. So let's all be clear about that. I know everybody else is here, but let's, the people watching, be clear about this. That's a minimum standard of living. And I think that a good business should be a good business. It should be a role model of understanding that workers who go to work every day, who stand on their feet every day for the course of that time, who take their jobs seriously, that they should be paid a living wage at the very least.
Jody Dominic is a registered nurse and a teacher at the pediatric unit at Sunrise Hospital in the great city of Las Vegas, Nevada.
Good morning, Senator Harris, and thank you for coming. I'm a pediatric nurse, like you said. I have personally seen families struggle between affording medication and affording food for their family. I've seen children, a 3-year-old fighting cancer that hit their lifetime maximum on their insurance, and parents figuring out how to continue care. I've been to too many funerals. What is your plan to make sure that healthcare is available for all Americans? And how will we keep the healthcare industry how will we keep them accountable to pay the healthcare workers that are providing that care a living wage?
So thank you for your work. And, you know, again, everyone here, the work that you do, the working people who are members of SEIU, I mean, let's remember what the S stands for. It's service. It's service. It's living a life of service for other people, to other people, lifting other people up. It's extraordinary work. It is the best kind of most noble work that any one human being can do for another. And so when we look at what's going on with the healthcare system, I'm supporting Medicare for all, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the biggest barrier to people having access to the health care they need, to your point, is money. It's money. So what we need to do is deal with that. And by having a system where everybody is in Medicare, we will reduce costs significantly for families such that that will not be the barrier to them receiving the care they need to alleviate their pain or to help the quality of their life. And the reality of it is that right now there are far too many people, to your point, who are not receiving the benefit of health care simply because they cannot afford it. And I believe that this is a moral issue. I believe this is an issue, again, that is about, it's a reflection of our values, and if we're going to be true to what we say are our values, then we have to reform the system, and Medicare for All is the way to do it. Part of the issue about cost is this. The pharmaceutical companies. Look, they are putting profit over public health. Let's be clear and state that clearly. And so what we have in America is a situation where, for example, people who have diabetes, 1 in 4 can't afford their insulin. I'm traveling the country, I'm meeting lots of families whose family member has an opioid addiction, right? Well, there is a syringe that contains a drug that if somebody has OD'd on an opioid, can help save their life. That syringe can cost up to $4,000. We've got to deal with the pharmaceutical companies, and the best way is that when everybody is in the Medicare system, we can negotiate those prices down. By the way, I also believe that people should be able to go to Canada and buy their drugs until this gets worked out. But there is that piece of it. There is also, to your point, the piece that is about having a system and reforming our system such that people have dignity in the process. My mother, who is the probably most important person in my life in terms of what has influenced me to be who I am today. She was all of 5 feet tall, but if you ever met her, you would have thought she was 7 feet tall. And but she passed away from cancer. And I went through that system with her. And for any, and many of you you give dignity and you give strength to cancer patients, and you know what I'm talking about. People go through that system where they are frail, where the families are trying to figure out what kind of medication on the different charts, trying to figure out how to get your family member in and out of the car into the hospital, trying to figure out what can you cook for your family member that they'll actually hold down or might enjoy eating. You know, it's a process of trying to figure out what kind of clothes can they wear that won't irritate their skin because they're so sensitive because of the chemo. It's about hearing some medical health professional talk to you about this thing called anticipatory grief, where you learn about the fact that, yeah, what you're actually doing is grieving the loss of somebody you love even before you've lost them. People going through all of that. You know, thankfully our mother had Medicare. But the thought and the knowledge that people in our country every day right now are going through all of that, and on top of that, they have to worry about how they can pay that bill. That's unconscionable. It's unconscionable. So what I say is we need Medicare for all. In that process, we can then look at what we do with the cost savings in a way that also recognizes that the wages and benefits of the people who are working in that system must be improved and can be improved.
Okay, we have just a few minutes left. Let me try to ask a quick, complicated question. So in California and many other states, a big issue that unions and many workers are concerned about is how to classify Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, whether they're employees or whether they're independent contractors. And there are many temps and more freelancers than before. And a lot of these workers don't get benefits. A lot of them, because they're independent contractors, can't join unions. What do you think? What would you do about this if you're president someday?
Well, not someday. I got a specific date. We need to support the right of folks to be able to organize. We need to support, and I would support the right of people to strike, support the right of people to collectively bargain, support the right of people to advocate for wages that meet the cost of living and workplace safety. And that is the position I would take. I have met many rideshare drivers who come to me and talk about the fact that it is helping to supplement their income. Again, go back to the point that, still though my goal would be as president that people should only have to work one job to be able to pay their bills. But it helps supplement their income. But and so they require and they lean on those jobs to help them make the ends meet. And they should not have to do it, they should not have to be in a working situation where it's about desperation and so they take whatever they're given. They should have the right to negotiate for the things they need that give them dignity and that their wages represent and reflect the value of the work that they are performing. And so that's the way I would approach it.
You mentioned the word dignity several times.
Yeah.
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes.
often said, all labor has dignity.
That's exactly right.
Unfortunately, too many employers cheat their workers out of the minimum wage, force people to work double shifts, don't pay them enough to live on.
Yeah.
What would you do to help ensure that, as I said, all labor, all workers are treated with dignity?
Well, again, I mean, I keep going back to the same point, and because I do believe it is one of the best ways to address the issue, and that is to support organized labor. I mean, I cannot stress it enough, and I know we all know it. And it's about allowing organized labor, one, to be free from the kind of attempts that have been made in many states and by many folks to dismantle and attack labor. So one, to protect labor from those attacks. But two, to allow labor to do its job of organizing new industries, of talking with workers about their needs and having them then have the ability to collectively bargain around those workers' needs. I mean, it's a really basic point. And from my perspective, the point is this, is a value. Nobody should be made to fight alone. Nobody should have to fight their fight alone. It's a really basic principle. And that is the principle, among many, upon which labor came into being. That worker who might be working 2 jobs, who's trying to pay the bill, who might have a sick baby at home, they shouldn't have to just negotiate one-on-one with the employer. There's no power in that. It's an uneven playing field. Massively uneven. So the point about organized labor is let the people organize collectively. And as a collective then, having similar concerns, similar experiences, speak in the voice that is proportionate to the need of people to be seen and heard. To then have the leverage to bargain, collective bargaining, to then bargain for better wages, better working conditions, better benefits. It's really basic. And anyone who would stand in the way of that basic principle is just unreasonable. It just is a basic matter. We can put all kinds of names on it, but just basically unreasonable. And so the kind of president I will be is to respect the purpose of organized labor, and to then promote that. Understanding, look, because it's all about bargaining, right? But you gotta allow people to start out on the same page, on the same base. And part of what's wrong with what's been happening recently in our country, and in particular under this administration, is there's a false assumption that they're trying to sell that everybody's starting out on the same base. Well, that ain't true. That's part of the problem of what we've been seeing. And so let's not buy what they're trying to sell. Let's understand that we need to even the playing field, and that organized labor in America has been one of the most effective in making sure that we even the playing field. And for that reason, I will always support organized labor, have always stood with organized labor, and always will.
Thank you, Senator. So everyone, we have a minute and a half left. Do you want to make closing remarks?
Sure. Listen, I think that we all know this is an inflection point in the history of our country. This is a moment in time that is requiring us each to look in a mirror, to collectively look in a mirror and ask a question. That question being, who are we? And I think part of the answer we all know is we are better than this. And so this is a moment in time that is requiring us to fight for the best of who we are. And I think that there have been many reasons why over the course of the last couple of years we have been dispirited, we have been concerned, we have been frustrated, we have been angry. People throwing stuff at an inanimate object called a television, going through individual and group therapy about it all. But I remain, SEIU, I remain optimistic. Because like you, I've been traveling and speaking with folks and meeting with folks. And I'll tell you, there is so much excitement and movement happening in our country right now. People are woke. And the challenge for us will be, which SEIU does so extremely well, The challenge will be to harness that energy and to organize folks and get them organized around getting registered to vote, getting folks to the polls. One of the biggest challenges that we've got right now is not the enthusiasm around knowing that we need to be and can be better than this. It's going to be about reminding people that they matter, that they have power, and that the power is with the people. And so, when we think about where we are right now, let's harness all that energy that's out there, knowing that the power is with the people. And I guess my final point is this: years from now, people are going to look at us, each one of us in our eyes, and they're going to ask us, where were you at that inflection moment? And what we want our response to be, and what it will be, is it's going to be more than just how we felt at this moment. Our response to them will be what we did, the action we took, that we organized folks, that we got people to the polls, that we stood up, that we stepped out, that we spoke up, that we fought for the best of who we are, and that we won. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator.